Raiza Biza, thank you so much for taking the time to come speak with me. Like, really appreciate it. I think I want to ask a question about you just summing up your like musical history from sort of when you started music to where you are today, and sort of like filling in those that time.
Uh, so I started making music. I started writing raps when I was about 11, and started recording my music when I was 16. I released my first project when I was 21, and since then I've just been releasing project after project. I've released about 4 or 5 projects so far, and I've just been building. I've been on the tour circuit for about 2 years, 3 years, and I've just been trying to, make things, keep things progressing each year. With each progress, with each project I do. So it's been a while. I've been doing music for a while, and it's just kind of last couple of years have been the point when it's really kind of started to come together. Mm.
So you said you started rapping when you were 16. Were you like always into like hip hop, or was it something else earlier than that?
Well, I started rapping when I was 11,
Yeah.
but I was when I started writing music or writing rap, it was more kind of just little battle raps with my friends. We just kind of diss each other's moms and stuff, and we weren't using beats at that point. It was just kind of like a cappella, and I guess a few of my friends kind of stopped, writing, and I was kind of by myself for a while, and I basically had to use beats because I wasn't rapping with anyone anymore. So, but it was always hip hop. It was hip hop that started me writing in the first place, and hip hop was always a constant kind of in my life as I was growing up. So it's really always been rap for me. I'm into a lot of different other types of music, but I guess hip hop is what I've identified most with.
Was there like a time between you sort of started writing raps and getting into it to like a time where you took it serious, or were you sort of serious from day one?
No, I only realized that I only became serious about it after I dropped my first project. When I dropped my first EP, Dream Something. I actually didn't think anyone was gonna hear it. I was just kind of putting it out there just to put it out there. But when I got picked up by a few blogs, Bass FM and a few sort of underground radio stations started picking up the songs, and I was like, man, maybe I can actually do something with this. And I guess after I released Dream Something, that was when I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna give this a proper try.
Yeah.
And it was a good decision.
Cool. When you released like your first like material, how did you go about releasing it? What sort of mediums did you use?
I used SoundCloud and Bandcamp. I think Bebo was dead back then. Was it Bebo era? Nah, I think it was after the Bebo era. But it was like MySpace. That's way back. It was Bandcamp and SoundCloud that I used, and Bandcamp was really important for me because it had a situation where if someone downloads your album, you can you get their email address, and it was it allowed me to really kind of build my audience and kind of have it there with me. But yeah, those at the beginning of my career, those are the mediums that I used to get my music out.
Yeah. Now that's interesting that you talk about like capturing people's emails and stuff like that. For somebody who's like into rap nowadays, they might just be starting off. They might be in a similar position that you were in. What sort of advice would you give them, like, to go about releasing their music today, sort of thing?
The release aspect of it.
Yeah, like what sort of mediums should they be using? How should they go about that?
I would always suggest, if it's singles, I think it's people should use SoundCloud. It's very easy to share music on there. It's very easy to kind of to track the statistics. I think as far as projects go, I would suggest Bandcamp. Like I mentioned before, I feel like as an independent artist, the most important tool that you have is your email list. Because your email list will outlive the various social media avenues that have come and gone over the last few years. If you had 100,000 friends on MySpace before, all of that doesn't count now. So every project, put it on Bandcamp, and also make it so that if you're releasing it for free, people have to put in their email address, so they have to exchange their email address for the free music, and you just keep on growing that list, and you communicate with them, with your fans every month, and for me, it's worked well because I'm able to kind of develop a relationship with my fans. I'm able to say, to kind of give them sneak previews of things before I release it to everyone else, and I'm confident that I can take that email list with me for throughout my career. If Facebook ever dies, my email list will still be there. If some new social media outlet pops up and you have to start from scratch again, I already have my email list. So Bandcamp.
Yeah. So do you mostly capture your emails from Bandcamp, or do you have a couple of other ways of getting emails?
My website has an email sign up sort of form, and with that you get like 2 unreleased songs. So there's kind of an incentive for people to sign up to it. So I get emails from my website, from Bandcamp, as well as as sometimes I'll have a show, maybe a free show, and then instead of people buying tickets, I'll just say, look, you sign up to my email list, and then I'll send you the RSVP. So there's various ways to build your email list, but I think the main thing I would do if I was a new artist would be to research, would be to get onto the internet and actually Google, how do I build my email list? How do I build my fan base on Facebook? There's so much information out there today that is, I'm pretty sure a lot of the methods I use are probably outdated, but I think that the email list is probably the foundation of any independent music career.
Yeah. So you've mentioned you use SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Facebook. Do you use like Instagram and Twitter or other forms of social media? And you've got your website, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all of them. I'm on the Instagram, the Twitter, the Snapchat, all of it. I try and stay up to date with all of them, because the internet is so important these days. It's pretty much the most important thing at the moment. I think like radio is not what it used to be. Music, TV is not what it used to be. So I think probably one of the smart things to do would be to find a website that keeps you up to date with the newest trends as far as social media, and then would just be to keep building, to keep building your fan bases on each one of them. Like I said before, there's a lot of social media websites that come and go, but you don't really at this point it's better to be in there at the beginning than to kind of be like, oh man, that website's still there. I suppose I better get on there. So I just try and be on all of them.
No, that's really good advice. Like, we haven't actually heard that advice from anyone we've interviewed before, and that's like, I really agree with what you're saying. Like, it's pretty important.
Yeah.
What are some things that you use your email list for? Like you said, you send people like snippets of your music or like unreleased songs. Do you ever like promote shows or promote upcoming tours, or what are some of the things that you use that list for? Oh yeah,
I use it for everything pretty much. That's my first stop when I'm releasing new content. I definitely use it for tours. The way that they structure email lists these days, you can actually specifically email people in various places. So if I'm doing a New Zealand tour, then I'll specifically send emails to my fans in New Zealand. If I'm touring Europe, I can specifically email those people. So I use it for everything. And I generally, as a sign of good faith, I like to give my email list first access to my content. So if I'm releasing an album next week, I'll try and make it available to my email list exclusively this week. And it kind of just gives them, it gives them a reason to stay on the email list. Because they're like, I'm actually getting something that I wouldn't actually get if I wasn't on the email list. Sometimes I might do a little merch run that has very limited pieces, 10 pieces or 20 pieces, and I'll send that out to my email list, and then if that sells out, then that's fine. It's kind of exclusively for the email list. So everything, anything from shows to new releases to features to to even just letting you know letting my fans know why maybe a project is taking so long. Maybe even just giving them a little bit of background information on the project that I just dropped, and kind of explaining some of the references that I make. So it's just it's the most important thing that I use.
Awesome. What are some things that you've been doing like currently, like music wise? Have you what's some things you got coming up in the next sort of 6 months, and what are some things that you're like working on at the moment?
I'm working on my next release, which I think will be done within the next 2 months. But I guess releasing will just come will be more of a strategic exercise. So I'm working on my new project. I've got a few videos coming out in the next month, 2 months, as well as the summer shows, a couple of festivals. So I'm just trying to stay busy and proactive, and what I really want to do this summer is work with kind of all the people that I had always dreamt of working with. I feel like I've just gotten to the point in my career where I can actually hit up these people, and then they'd be like, "Oh, hey, yeah, I've heard of you," Whereas in the last couple of years, it was kind of, I was kind of on the outside looking in, and now it's like I'm a little bit more on the inside. So yeah, that's I want to take off a few collabs off my bucket list, and tour, release this project, and just keep it moving.
Cool. Do you like sort your gigs out yourself? Do you do that all like self? Do you have a manager like that manages your?
I don't have a manager in New Zealand. I've got a manager in Australia, but as far as New Zealand goes, I handle all of my background stuff myself.
Yeah. And so you just sort of like approach these people you want to work with and collab with just yourself, just hit them up sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, New Zealand is. I've had managers over here before, but I've just kind of my career really wasn't at the point where I needed one at that point. And the thing about New Zealand is it's quite it's a small place, and people it's not as formal as maybe Europe or the US is. You can usually the people who you're reaching out to will just hit you back. So I've never really needed a manager over here. I kind of focus my energy on getting representation in Australia, Europe, US. So I'm self-managed at the moment, but who knows? Maybe in the next year that might change.
Cool. So when you're like trying to, if you want to like line up some gigs for like the next couple of months, how do you go about that?
In my position, or if I was
for you.
I mean, at this point, people reach out to me. I don't do as much organizing my own gigs as I used to. I barely do that. So yeah, at this point, I just kind of I'll get the email, and then I'll figure out things logistically, and just kind of put it together from there.
And what sort of advice could you give to someone who wants to start getting gigs, but they're obviously not at your sort of level? They're just sort of starting out, got a little bit of buzz going for themselves.
Well, what I did when I was starting off was I would basically find out who organizes the various hip hop nights or the various hip hop gigs in the different cities, and I would literally say to them, "Look, I would like to come and play 2 songs. I will pay to get in the show. I will pay for my own transport. I'll pay for my own accommodation. I just want to do 2 songs." And most promoters will just say, "Okay, cool. We'll put you on as soon as doors open." And once you do that, and you kind of show them that that you're reliable, you're enthusiastic, and you really want to be there, usually you'll get a call sometime in the near future saying, "Hey, do you want to come back for the next one?" And I did that everywhere. I did that in Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, little towns like Tauranga, Whangarei, and that's part of the reason why I perform in so many places that don't traditionally have as much rap shows. But it just takes that initial initiative. As a new artist, you really have to develop this kind of this hunger, this you know, you can't really you can't settle for no. You know, if you come across an obstacle, you really have to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way that you can get around that. And the hard part is just getting in the door. And once you're in there, and once you know the people, it just gets so much easier. But a lot of the time, you know, a lot of the young people, young artists that I come across, you know, artists are notoriously introverted, and they live inside their own heads. So they often don't want to kind of take the risk of putting themselves out there in case they get rejected. And I think that's the biggest obstacle for a lot of the younger artists, and for any artist, you know. So you just kind of got to give yourself a good pep talk and just say, yo, you know, I'm just going to go and, you know, hit that person up and try to make something happen.
Awesome. Is there any like places in Auckland that are like distinctly good to get your first gig? You know, quite sort of lenient places that you can wiggle your way in?
That's a good question. I think Neck of the Woods has a lot of things happening. Neck of the Woods is a pretty good place at the moment. I think when I was coming up, it was places like Ricino's. What was that other? Remember that? Kuja Lounge. Places like that. Any place that has an open mic is a great start. You know, and I think Neck of the Woods has an open mic night. But it's really more about the relationships. You know, if you know someone who organizes, you know, something or another, you know, those are the best people to speak to, because even if they're not organizing something, they probably will know someone else who's doing bookings. So and you know, the same thing goes for me. I'm more interested in, you know, if I'm looking for a support act for my show, I'm more interested in someone who's willing to take that initiative and kind of really sort of not really be pushy, but be like, you know, man, you know, this time I'm ready, you know, okay, you got a slot? Not this time, but, you know, hit me up for the next show. Yo, okay, next show's happening, can I get, okay, yeah, I'll get you in there, you know. So it's the skill and the music aspect is one thing, but you can have the most talented person, if they don't seem like they want to do it, you know, they probably won't get that opportunity. So for myself, as well as I'm sure all the booking agents and show promoters, it's just about that person who's really kind of like persistent, who's really like, yo, you know, get me in there. You know?
When you first started off, like, trying to get serious about music, did you have that, like, that persistence, that drive that you have now? Was that, like, always part of your character, or did that, like, develop along the way as you sort of learn new things and whatnot?
I mean, I'm naturally I'm naturally an introvert, you know, and I'm kind of just like many artists. I live inside my own head. I'll you know, if I don't keep it in check, I'll let my imagination get carried away into and start creating reasons why it might not be possible. But books, reading, articles on the internet, those were always my friends as I was coming up, and they said the same thing that I'm saying now. You know, they said, look, we know you're probably thinking that this won't work, and you're living in your head, and you don't want to reach out to people, but you have to, otherwise just quit. You know, and I kind of had to toil with that for a while, but when I did decide, look, I really want to do this music thing, I knew I was gonna have to change aspects of my personality. You know, I was gonna have to work on them and try and overcome those things that were holding me back. So no, I wasn't always persistent and insistive. Is that I don't know if that's a word, but I wasn't always like that. I had to develop that, and that was the best thing that I could have done for my career, because that was what opened a lot of the doors, that I frequently walk through now.
Is there like one piece of advice you could give that you've learned along your journey that you could give to an up-and-coming artist, like the most important sort of fundamental thing that you could give to them?
I have two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice would be to master your own craft, to become the best version of yourself, musically. I feel like a lot of people start releasing music too early, a lot of people, because the way an artist normally progresses is they become passionate about an art form, then they start creating the art form, and then they start emulating their heroes within the art form, and then they master it, and then they start developing their own identity. I feel like a lot of artists start releasing music at the point when they're emulating their heroes, you know, and at that point it's kind of like you were just kind of you were a not as good version of someone else, you know. So the first bit of advice I would give would be to master what you do, you know, and it can be anything. There's one thing I've learned, that there's a market for anything, any type of music in the world, whether you make Korean anime rap or whether you make Scandinavian folk music. There's an audience for you. You just have to hone in on your skill, and then find your audience, you know. But the first thing is to just develop your own style, you know. To this day, I still write music every day, you know. And you'd be surprised how many people who say that they're trying to become a rapper, but they write music like once a month, you know. If that's what you know, if you want to do this music thing, you really have to treat it like a job, you know, like a 9-to-5 job, you know, because you won't get those type of results unless you actually treat it like a job, you know. And put in that time and effort into hone your skill. And then the second aspect would be research. You know, I spend not as much these days, but I used to spend half my day in between, you know, when I didn't have a full-time job, I would spend literally half of my day writing music, and the other half like on websites like guerrilla music marketing, or independent music marketing articles, or listening to audio books, you know, that were written by independent artists that, you know, are now established. And I would just soak in this information and let it seep into my subconscious to the point where it just became, you know, I knew, okay, I'm releasing a track, okay, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta do that, you know. So half of it is research, knowing more than your competition, and the other half is being the best version of yourself as far as as far as the music you create. And the reason I say best version of yourself is you don't have to be the best rapper, you know. You just have to be the best rapper that you can be. You know, if you can still get this much better, then you might not be ready to start releasing music yet, you know. You have to get to the point where you kind of like, you know what, I feel very confident in what I do. I may not be as quick a rapper as that guy, or I may not have as many sort of punchlines as that rapper, but as far as what I do, you know, no one can do it like me, you know. And those two aspects, the research and the mastery of your own craft, those are the things that I think take an artist to the next level.
Yeah, no, I think that's really sound advice, like pretty solid. Like not many people say advice like that.
Yeah,
mate. Is there anything you want to ask for?
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, I think that went really well. Is there anything else you want to say? You can just speak about whatever you want. Like
yeah, there's how do I put this? Networking, you know, connecting with people who have progressed further than you in that specific field is very important. It's some of the best advice that I've gotten. All the best advice that I've gotten came from people who have already been there, you know. And it's weird because a lot of it came from people who I didn't even think would reply to my message, you know. Like P Money literally had like a coffee with me and broke down the game for me, you know. And this is like 2 years ago, you know. Tom Scott and the homebrew guys and at Peace, etc. They all were, they didn't hesitate to give me advice, you know. And a lot of the time, like I said before, with the whole artistic anxiety and whatnot, you're like, well, no, I don't want to reach out because if they don't, send a message back, then what does that mean? You know, you just have to reach out. And I guess the best way, sometimes people reach out to me in the wrong way. Sometimes, and I'm quite busy in context, but I know artists who are bigger than me are even more busy than that. So you have to just make your questions short and sweet. You know, don't be like, how do I make it? You know, it's like, no, if the person is really the right person to be asking, then they won't have time to tell you how to make it. But say, hey, look, how can I expand my Twitter followers? Yeah, okay, do this, do that, do that. You know, don't be afraid to reach out to people. You know, don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid of rejection. Because if you want to be a musician, you're gonna deal with a lot of rejection. You know, rejection must become your friend. You know, but yeah, the importance of networking can't be understated. And you know, if you're a shy person, it's just really something that you have to work through. Because a lot of the advice that you need, a lot of the guidance that you're gonna need is gonna come from outside parties. You know, it's gonna come from people who, you know, people who you probably will get shy around, people who you probably have looked up to for a long time. So you know, networking, connecting with like minds, and making sure the circle that you're in, you know, has people who are as ambitious as you. You know, people who have a similar vision and who want to, you know, reach a certain level in their lives. You know, for years I was hanging out with people who liked to rap, but they had no ambition to make something of it. You know, and I felt like that was kind of, you know, it was affecting me. You know, because I was like, this is comfortable. You know, but when you're around people who are ambitious and who want to make things happen, you kind of like, you feel guilty if you don't. You know, so I think the importance of networking, connecting with like minds, and just reaching out. You know, it's I can't understate the importance of that.
True.
Can't overstate the importance of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that went pretty good, man. That was awesome.
Sure.
Well, Raiza Biza, thank you so much. Appreciate it, man.
Ooh.
Cool.
Easy,
Yeah,
bro.
nice, bro. That was good.
Oh, you know.